When did you start feeling so sorry for yourself? It's unbearable. What? So you think we might have put a few people out of business today? That's all for naught. But you've been doing that every day for almost 40 years, Sam. And if this is all for naught, then so is everything out there. It's just money. It's made up. Pieces of paper with pictures on it so we don't have to kill each other just to get something to eat.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Today on the show, I talk with Blair duQuesnay. She's a financial advisor with Ritholtz Wealth Management. She also writes the popular finance blog, The Bell Curve. And I was excited for this conversation, in part because Blair is another person who has an interesting career path. It includes studying for years to become a professional ballet dancer, working in New York City in 2008 and having a front row seat to the great financial crisis. We talked about that. We talked about what she learned from those experiences, as well as what she loves about her current job, and a lot more. So let's get into it with Blair duQuesnay. You grew up in Alabama. Do I have that right?
I did. I was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama.
What did your parents do?
My dad worked in a family business. He was a business owner with his brother. They operated the trucks that would take the concrete to the job and pour it. So Ready Mix Concrete was the business, and it had been founded by his great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather in 1898. And my mom was a kindergarten teacher, very beloved, taught so many people's children kindergarten over the years. Both recently retired in the last few years.
Good for them. Do you have an early memory of money?
I think about this a lot because I write about money scripts. And to be honest, I do believe this is true. My first memory of money is seeing the offering plate at church. So I don't have a lot of clear memories of being really, really young, but at some point I have flashes of memories. And I know that we went to church every week. And on Sunday, every, church service, they would pass this beautiful golden plate around, and everybody would put $1 or $5 or a check that they had written. And we would always want to have our dollar ready. And I love that story because if you know about money scripts, the things that are imprinted in your brain early, I love that my first memory of money is giving it away and giving freely. And that's just a beautiful memory.
The church that we went to when I was a kid, it wasn't a plate that was passed. It was these baskets that were, at the end of long poles. So it's like someone would come and put it down your row. And I would always peek in, just be like, how much money is in there?
It's a lot of cash. Even today, even in 2026, I'll see a lot of cash in the offering plate. It's really neat.
What was the first job you had when you were a teenager?
I had two. I did teach 3- and 4-year-olds ballet because I was a ballet dancer. I would say my first job out in the community was a hostess at a local Montgomery, Alabama special called Gators. And it was a Louisiana-themed restaurant, which is interesting because now New Orleans is my home. And they did serve fried gator, but on the weekends I would seat people. I think I still was asking them back then, did they want to sit in the smoking or non-smoking section?
Oh, God.
And it was a lot of fun. We had butcher block paper. So when I would seat someone, I would have to rip the white paper off and put it on the table. And if they had kids, I would put the crayons on the table, and learned a lot working with servers in high school. Yep.
Was money something that was talked about in the home? I mean, both your parents working, your mother being in education where nobody goes into education to get wealthy. Was it a topic around the table, or was it just sort of like, nope, that's just between the parents?
I wouldn't say it was explicitly talked about. Polite Southern society is, money is something that you don't speak about. I do have a memory of being 16 and having a car that I would drive and realizing that the decal that showed the prep school that I went to might make me a target for police to pull over. So I had some impression that we were better off than others in the community, but I kind of lived in this bubble where all of my friends were in that upper middle class range. Nobody was particularly like super ultra high net worth. So we were all kind of in the same range. Most of us were given some sort of car to drive at 16. Not all of them were brand new. So I kind of understood our status, but we didn't speak about it very openly. But I do think that values were passed down about, not overspending, making sure that you have enough to save for the future and that you have enough to give, obviously, at church every weekend. But in other ways, my mom was very involved civically in the community. She served on a lot of boards. And so giving was a value that was passed down.
Was that part of the conversation when you got the job at Gators? That like, okay, you're going to be earning money now, and part of this needs to go into a savings account. Part of this needs to go in the collection plate on Sunday.
No, I was really just always wanting to be independent. I always say I was an adult in a child's body. And so I was just ready to go out there and have my own money. But there was an expectation that I would pay for my own gas and that I would pay for my own extracurricular activities in high school. And so I wanted to go out and earn some money to be able to do that. Of course, it was 99 cents a gallon gas at the time. So even though I drove a gas guzzling SUV, it wasn't that expensive. They did give me a credit card to start building a credit history. And so I would put the gas on the credit card, and there was an expectation that that should be paid off every month and not accumulate.
So you mentioned teaching ballet to young kids. Do I have this right that when you went to college, University of Georgia, you went in as a dance major? Do I have that right?
You're right about entering college as a dance major, but I entered college at Southern Methodist University. They have an amazing dance program, and a lot of people I had known had gone through that program who were older than me. And so I wanted to be a ballet dancer. I wanted to be a classically trained ballet dancer. That was the career that I wanted, and I did enter college with that major. And when I decided to change majors, I also realized that I wanted to be at a different school, and so I transferred and graduated from the University of Georgia.
What was the major you ended up getting? It was business administration, wasn't it?
Yes, with finance was the specialty. And that happened because somewhere along the way I was double majoring in business and then dropped dance altogether and transferred. But in those prerequisites to entering business school, I took Accounting 101 and I learned the concept of the time value of money. And like a true nerd, I was hooked and I wanted to learn more about how compounded returns can grow. And I was interested in markets. And so I ended up majoring in finance.
It's interesting that, because on the surface, you have a very artistic passion that you're pursuing. And then at the other end of the spectrum is just numbers. And did you have that interest in numbers beforehand, or when you transferred and thought, all right, I'm going to spread out what I'm studying here, is that when you started to find your interest in money and finance and accounting?
I just always knew numbers were easy for me. In 8th grade, I was asked to be on the math team. I served on the math team at school for several years. I took AP calculus and passed that exam and tested out of a lot of college courses because of that. So math came easy to me. It wasn't ever a struggle. And so naturally, I just gravitated towards that part of the business school.
What was the reaction from your parents when you start talking to them about studying finance? Because I'm guessing they were very supportive of your interest in dance, but they may have also had a conversation with you about, all right, this is a tough career to make a living in. And what was their reaction? Yeah,
they were fine with that decision completely. I think for me, what I knew about dance is you do not need a college degree to be a ballet dancer. In fact, if you're going to be a successful, in the top companies, you don't go to college. So I was already on the path to, if I can be a professional dancer, it's not going to be at a top company and it's going to be a short career and there's going to be very little earning. So on my own, I just sort of sought out a second degree. And so they were very supportive, even with the revelation that I wanted to change schools right in the middle of college. But I applied on my own. Like I said, I've always had this independent streak. So I just went out and filed the applications. They had saved for college. And so there was money there. And I transferred to a much lower cost university. So it was all good. There was nothing to complain about.
What gets you from Georgia to New York City when it comes to, you graduate, you have your degree, and you're starting your career in finance? What gets you to New York?
Yeah, so it's interesting because New York was sort of the center of ballet in America. The two top companies are there. And New York is the center of money in the US. So I would always felt that draw to New York City. And I didn't even get to visit until I was in college. I did a summer program where we went to New York for a week and to London for 3 weeks. And I kind of call it like the finance nerds field trip of a college program. We got to go to the New York Mercantile Exchange. We got to go to the London Metal Exchange, visit all these places that you read about in the books. And so New York was always calling. And even though my first job out of college was in Atlanta, as a lot of University of Georgia graduates moved to Atlanta, and a broker at UBS hired me to be on their team. But then I was at a big brokerage firm and I was able to transfer. And so New York had always been calling. It had always been a passion of mine. And so I just asked if I could transfer up to New York City.
You were working in finance in New York City when the great financial crisis hits in 2008. What was it like having a front row seat at that?
It was wild. I was in an office at 1251 of the Avenue of the Americas, and it literally backs up to the Lehman Brothers headquarters. So Lehman Brothers had a business formal dress code, and that week that they were going under, there were reporters approaching me on the street to ask if I worked for Lehman and if I would do an interview about what was going on. I saw people walking out with their boxes. I have vivid memories of where I was on each day. I was visiting a client out in Connecticut when Bear Stearns traded under $3. And so just all of those milestones stick in my head because I had a front row seat. It was a scary time. And although I wasn't earning a lot and didn't have a lot to lose, I just saw the fear in so many clients and advisors who just were scrambling to figure out what's the best thing that we can do to protect our clients' assets when the whole system seems to be, stopping. The cogs and the wheels weren't even working at one point. So it was a very frightening time. And I am glad that I was in my early to mid 20s during that time because I wasn't personally feeling the loss, although I did lose my job at some point, as many mid 20-somethings did during that time.
So what gets you to where you are now in New Orleans?
I moved to New Orleans for love. I met my husband. We started dating long distance. I had been to New Orleans once or twice as a child, but what I didn't know until I revisited after we started dating was that New Orleans has just enough grit to be a city in the U.S. that I would want to move to from New York, which I never thought I would leave. And so we fell in love. We were dating, and luckily it worked out. About a year after I moved down here, we got engaged. And now we have 2 young children, and New Orleans is my adopted hometown.
You started your own firm there?
At first I did. So I mentioned losing my job in the financial crisis. I was laid off from the brokerage firm, and that ended up being one of the best things that's ever happened in my career, because when I was rehired at an independent RIA called WealthStream Advisors, and did not even know that was a business model that existed. I thought if you were going to be a financial advisor, you had to work at a brokerage firm or a bank or an insurance company. And so that forced movement over to the RIA channel has been the best thing that's happened in my career, luck-wise, even though it felt unlucky at the time. And so when I moved down to New Orleans, I knew that I wanted to remain in the independent space. And it's a small town, New Orleans, punches well above its weight in culture and things to do. But a lot of the RIAs here are very small. Some of them, everybody has the same last name. There wasn't really a spot for a late 20-something CFA, CFP credentialed professional to jump into. And so I ended up founding my own RIA, where I was trying to focus on Gen X and millennial clients at the time, finding that age gap between me and the traditional retiree was a little bit too great to sort of be out on my own and bring in clients that way. And so for a while there, I was running my own very small RIA, doing hourly financial planning and wealth management.
And waiting tables to help pay the bills?
Yes, my skill set came back in handy. I was living off of the little meager amount that I had put away in a 401k during my 20s in New York when half of my money went to rent anyway. So you can imagine how large that sum was. And so I worked down the street at a very famous institution here in New Orleans. If you went to Tulane or were in college during any time in New Orleans, Bruno's Tavern. And I wasn't actually behind the bar, which is where the real money is made, but I did wait tables, and sometimes I would be waiting tables until midnight or 2 a.m. When the college students were there late at night, and on Saints games. I did a lot of Sunday Saints games, waiting tables.
This is what I find interesting is you're in New York working in finance when the Great Recession hits, you get laid off, you start your own firm, and I'm sure part of that was exciting, but also there's the struggle to the point where you're waiting tables to make ends meet. How did you maintain your sense of optimism through that all? Because I think either one of those, and certainly both together, would make a lot of people in finance say, you know what, I'm just going to find something else to do with my life.
I will say that there was a time that I almost broke and I went and interviewed at JP Morgan for a private banker position because I just thought I'm going to have a salary at some point. I think the good thing about being young and broke is that my husband and I were in it together. I had reduced my expenses down to the bare minimum. I think my rent was $800 a month, and bought an old Honda with a small payment of $200 a month. And there was not much else that had to be covered. We didn't have family. We didn't have a mortgage. And I just always had a confidence. I knew that I could scrape by. I would find a way to cover my expenses if I needed to. And even if that meant waiting tables or finding other side gigs. There was a very interesting side gig at that time that came along. There was a group of us doing hourly financial planning around the country, including Alan Moore, who is one of the co-founders of XY Planning Network. He found us a gig on a website called ehow.com where we would sit for $50 an hour and wait to see if somebody asked a question to a professional, and we would answer those questions. So we did a lot of things, and I just was young and didn't have a lot of responsibilities, and I just kind of knew I would make it. But I had moments of doubt for sure, and going to interview at JP Morgan was one of them. I would have had to go back in to get my Series 7 and show up at the office at 7:30 every morning for the morning meeting. And that wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do, but I did consider it at one point.
Thank you for pulling back the curtain on how ehow.com operated, because I remember that website and going to it a couple of times and thinking, how does this work exactly?
Yeah, it was fun, but you had to stay at your computer because it would ding if they asked a question. So your only job was to be there to answer those questions. And it was a lot of fun, but we didn't get a whole lot of questions, which is probably why they discontinued that service.
Want to say a quick word about Mar, the chili garlic crunch that is one of the best condiments I've ever tasted. It's not only delicious, it is so versatile. That's why I love it. I'm talking the kind of thing where you can put it on eggs in the morning, on a sandwich at lunch, add it to a dip for snack time, whatever you're making for dinner. Once you have a jar in your kitchen, you're not going to go back. Go to ilovemarmar.com, use the promo code MONEY at checkout, and you get 10% off your order. They've got classic Marmar, the spicy version if you want some more heat. They even make a gluten-free version. That's ilovemarmar.com. Use the promo code MONEY, get 10% off. Trust me on this one. All right, let's get back to Blair. How much did you and your husband talk about money before you got married?
Not a lot. We were both broke. There wasn't a lot to talk about.
There wasn't much to talk about.
And it's funny because over the years, things have just come up where we've combined our finances. It was never really a plan, right? First, we weren't married, we were dating, and we just had separate accounts. Then we were living together and sharing expenses, but we had different accounts, and he would pay some from his account and I would pay some from mine. And then we ended up buying our starter home, and we applied for a joint home equity line together. And so we had our first joint account. And then over the years, it just made sense to just have everything in basically one joint account where we both spend from. And that's just happened naturally over time. And I think that's part of knowing who's the right person to marry, is without having to explicitly talk about, how do you feel about debt or expenses or spending. We shared a lot of the same values, but we do differ for years and years and years. And I might have finally broken him of this. If he sat down at a restaurant, he would look at the prices and he would be very influenced by the prices about what he wanted to order. And he would always equate what you could buy that actual food in the grocery store to the price. And I would have to explain to him, they have rent, they have employees. They also need to make a profit if they can. It's not the same. And hopefully they're buying higher quality food than we are. But I think he can finally sit down and enjoy a meal without trying to calculate how much profit is in it for the restaurant.
Before we go to the speed round, there is one thing I want to ask about your current job, because you work with ultra high net worth clients. And that's a phrase I've heard, but never really was able to wrap my brain around, and did a little research to find out, well, what does that actually mean? And it seems like the general definition is someone who has at least $30 million in investable assets. And in thinking about that number, for me, and I'm guessing for 99% of the people listening to this conversation, having $30 million would feel like the finish line. It would feel like I don't ever have to worry about money again. Do you get that sense from your clients, or are they just like non-ultra high net worth clients in that everybody has problems with money regardless of how much money they have?
Yeah, there's a line, more money, more problems. That's not always the case, because having enough money solves a lot of problems. But now you have all this money and you're responsible for it. You're the steward of the money. And that is tough. That is a big responsibility. And so I always say clients in our multifamily office, they're not concerned about running out of money. They're concerned about not making mistakes. They don't want to mess it up. And with that amount of money, it can be easy to make mistakes that are very costly from a dollar perspective. And so it's a different mindset altogether, because running out of money is not the concern. And it becomes much more complicated because now we're talking about, in a lot of cases, transfer of wealth down to multiple generations and bringing in family dynamics. And what would it be like if, my young adult children were to suddenly inherit these funds? Are they prepared? Do they know? What restrictions do I want to put on them? Some or none, or something in between. Am I comfortable with the spouse of my children? How is that dynamic? It gets very, very difficult. These are difficult conversations. And it's a different problem you're solving. And people are very appreciative, especially on the estate tax planning. The time that you spend as an advisor helping someone transfer multiple millions of dollars and save multiple millions of dollars on estate tax, you become more valuable to that person, not more valuable as a person or as a professional, but to that client, you become more valuable. And there's a lot of, what's the term where you don't feel like you belong? Imposter syndrome that comes along with that, because while the client is still a person, just like any other person with a different size net worth, the advisor is still that same person who has worked with Gen X clients that are trying to figure out if they should put $23,000 into their 401k and pay off their student loans, to the person with three commas, right? It's very different, and there's just a lot of complexity that comes with having more money. So I think everybody's goal is to figure out what their number is and not shoot too high. Because if you shoot too high, sometimes your money becomes a job in and of itself.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
I'm generally not a things person. However, I recently redecorated some of the rooms in my house, and I bought curtains that I've never spent a lot of money on window treatments. I was nervous about the price. And every single day since I bought those curtains that I walk down my stairs and see them, I feel good. And so this is one of the first times in my adult life that I can equate a thing with a feeling of happiness and calm. And so I'm very satisfied with those curtains.
On the flip side, have you made a purchase in your adult life that you regret and sometimes you find yourself thinking about it?
Yes. So when I went on my senior trip in high school, I told you I went to a prep school, so we had things called senior trips. And they used to do cruises, but the cruise lines had cut down on high school kids going on cruises with one or two chaperones. And so we went to an island resort, and I had a boyfriend back home. And without thinking to ask what it would cost to pick up the phone in the hotel room and call him, I proceeded to have like a 45-minute conversation with him.
Oh my.
And when I went to get the bill, I think it was like $400. It was like the worst experience of, I didn't know what I had done, and then I had to pay for it. And I had that credit card. I think it had a $600 limit that I was supposed to put my gas on. And so I put it on the credit card, and it took me a few months to pay it off, and it was not worth it. And it was a terrible waste of money. And I should have just been out with my friends having fun instead of talking to my boyfriend on the phone. But I did it, and I'm still ashamed of that to this day.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself? Was it the curtains?
I actually have a little bit more of a fun one, because as I've gotten older, I am interested in gemstones and jewelry. And so for my birthday this year, I bought an amethyst pendant. Both of my kids were born in February, so amethyst is the birthstone. So I have a really beautiful, I forget if it's like 18 carats or whatever, amethyst, beautifully cut pendant necklace, and I love to wear it.
What is something about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
I wish I knew that I could take more risk. I've always been risk averse. 22 years old, filling out my first 401k allocation. I think I went 90-10. I never went 100% stocks. Even now, I have bonds where a lot of people in my age bracket in the advisory space, they don't have any bonds. So I've always been a little bit more risk averse. I wish I had known that I could have taken more risks, even if they didn't work out. I did take risks with my career, with starting an RIA.
I was going to say, it's interesting that you're risk averse in this sliver of your financial life, because looking at your career, it does not look like the career of someone who is risk averse.
Yeah, I guess I took the risk somewhere else. And so I transferred some of the risk mitigation techniques into how I invested the money that I was actually able to save and accumulate. Not to an extreme case, but if I had taken more risk, those numbers on the screen would be more now than they are today. So,
what is a charitable cause that you'd like to support?
I am on the board of an amazing nonprofit here in New Orleans called Cafe Reconcile. We help young people with job skills. And we do that through the lens of the food service industry. So we operate a cafe. And so while there's a lot of work that goes on with the social workers just to help people become stable enough to actually train for a job, and that's a lot of work that includes making sure they have housing and transportation and all sorts of things taken care of, they actually go in and train both back of house in the kitchen and front of house. And then they have externships. And so I'll be rolling into the chair position of Cafe Reconcile in January. And so it's close to my heart, and I love to donate to that organization.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Just given my work with ultra high net worth, I really enjoyed Succession. Obviously, those are to the extreme examples, but just thinking about the family dynamics of what extreme wealth can provide, I found that very interesting. I love, obviously, character development, and Succession had amazing character development. But there were some pathways that really resonated with me that helped me better understand my own clients, which was interesting. None of my clients are anything like the Roys, just to get that out there.
Just to be clear. The last thing is a penny for your thoughts, and this is just any sort of wisdom you've picked up along the way that you want to share with people who are listening. And it doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything.
I would say money is a tool. And I've been thinking about this a lot. If you leave the tool in the tool shed forever and never use it, what was the point? And I say that because I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about their why. What's it for? What's this money doing for you? And accumulating higher numbers on the screen is not an answer. That is somebody who hasn't figured out their why. So you got to use the tool. And I spend so much time helping people understand how they want to use that tool. There's no right answer. Everybody has a different way that they can experience joy through using their money as a tool. But I know this, letting it build and build into a bigger number that you see on a statement is not the answer. And so I'm very passionate about helping people find their why.
There you go. Find your why, people. Find your why. I love that. You can check out Blair's blog, The Bell Curve. I put a link in the show notes. And if you're enjoying the show, giving it a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it helps other people find the show. I appreciate it. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.